Good afternoon. Welcome to this session titled Urban Mobility, Cities as Urban Hubs and Urban Logistics. I'm your moderator for this session, Yannick Bousse, from the European Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency. I'm here together with my co-moderator, Ivo Cré from POLIS. And in this session, we will discuss how projects are transforming cities into climate neutral and connected multimodal urban nodes for passengers and goods. We'll also discuss how urban logistics can tackle the requirements of the on-demand economy. Now, what we see is that the Trans-European Transport Network relies on urban mobility for the first and last mile connections for both passengers and freight. And cities and regions have been asked to play an even larger role in the TEN-T of the future to improve mobility and transport flows. Now we can see this being achieved by ensuring multimodal hubs to improve the first and last mile connections, and also by ensuring that local authorities are better involved in the governance of the TEN-T network. We also see that urban freight and logistics play an essential role in the functioning of urban economies. However, actions have been needed to provide inputs into preparation and implementation of sustainable urban logistics plans and also sustainable urban mobility plans. And these have been essential factors to reach zero-emission city logistics in major urban areas by 2030. And to discuss these points, we have with us here today 4 projects. And these speakers will be presenting their results and achievements from the projects of Move21, Scale Up, LEAD, and ULaaDS. Then with this, we'd like to move to our first project and our first speaker. That's Tina Ruhan. Tina works for the city of Oslo in the office of the governing mayor. She's the project manager, the project coordinator of Move21, an innovation action that demonstrates integrated urban transport solutions in 6 European cities and regions. She's passionate about cities can harness innovation capacities to reach our 2030 climate goals. Tina is educated in sustainable development and has worked on topics related to climate change mitigation policy, renewable energy, transport, and civic technology for the past 2 decades. Then we can hand over to Tina for Move21. I will have a timer also on the screen.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the clicker?
Beautiful. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much, Yannick, for the nice introduction. Hold on. Let me move this side. As mentioned, my name is Tina. I work for the city of Oslo. So not at a university or research institute, as most of you, I suppose, or most presenters here today. And I think I will probably have least technology in my presentation. We are very much policy oriented in our project, so it'll be quite heavy on that. Here we go. So some key information about Move21. It's a Horizon 2020 Innovation Action. We're in month 34 of 48 months, so in our 3rd year. It answers the destination smart, green and integrated transport. We have 24 partners in 7 countries. We have a mix of local and regional authorities, representing quite large cities and functional and urban areas as partners. We have research institutes, we have businesses, as well as NGOs involved. We have about 9 million euros funding from the Commission, with a total budget of about 10 million, and of course actually now quite considerable amounts of additional investments from both public and private sector partners or associates. This is actually quite important to us. So we really very much consider the funding from the EU as sort of seed funding, if you wish. And will end in April next year. And I thought you almost stole my speaking points there for a minute, Yannick, because our overall aim of the project is, of course, to to help cities transform into climate neutral and connected multimodal nodes for mobility and logistics. And this is sort of the overall aim for the project. And we work on both topics related to passenger and freight transport. And this duality is very important to us, this sort of, because it enables us to have this integrated approach. And by integrated, it means we're looking at both technology, governance, and sort of more societal issues. I'll get back to that in a minute. These are the cities involved in the project. We work primarily with the cities that are called living labs and replicator cities. And if you notice, they are actually on the same TNT corridor. And Yannick already mentioned the TNT network. This is not by coincidence, this is by design. We wanted it this way. And all of the 6 cities, Oslo, Gothenburg, Hamburg, Munich, Bologna, and Rome, are large cities, large urban nodes that alone stand for over 20% of the GDP on the ScanMed corridor, so this same TNT corridor that I mentioned to you earlier. And I'll get back to why I'm saying this. It will make sense in a minute. We have essentially 3 work streams, or main roads, if you want, in which we create both immediate and more long-term results in the project. Firstly, we have the actual innovative measures that are now being deployed in partner cities as we speak. And these focus on increasing connections, last mile and first mile services, and on both passenger and freight transport and connections to the corridor level from these urban areas. And I'll get back to these specific innovations in a bit. Secondly, we create capacities and capabilities for improved conditions for innovation in cities, and make specific recommendations and observations when it comes to innovation capacity and policy coherence. And this is actually quite important, because it means that we don't only work on, let's say, measure level, but we also work on systems level within the city. And thirdly, of course, we are working through the ScanMed Observatory. And it's a peer group and an interface for urban nodes on the corridor and TNT level. And I'll get back to this in a minute, but what I would like to really highlight is, of course, that we work in the sort of interface between the TNT domain and the urban mobility domain. And these are traditionally 2 very distinct domains that don't necessarily mesh all together all too well. And the overall aim, of course, in the project is to improve efficiency, capacity utilization, accessibility, and innovation capacity. This is a very sort of short recap of the overall engagement process that we have in the project, which is quite ambitious. And we have designed a framework through which we can co-create solutions and upscale them and replicate them and learn from each other and collaborate on corridor level on the ScanMed corridor. And finally, more, let's say, another level even to that, which is in principle for the benefit of all 431 urban nodes, which is more about, dissemination and learning from what we've been doing. And at this stage, I can also mention that we, of course, collaborate very well with a lot of other projects, not to mention Scale Up, our sister project. We work on several topics together, on evaluation efforts, on dissemination efforts, or on urban nodes topics. So that's a very fruitful and ongoing collaboration. We've also tried to see what the commonalities are with LEAD, and specifically related to digital twin. We also work with a Horizon project called Atelier, which is more on the methodology part. We've tried to see commonalities with the fast track that I believe just ended quite recently on capacity building. So we tried to see these commonalities and work also with other Horizon projects. And of course, Move 21 as a project and as a concept underpinning the project, very much inspired by Vital Nodes, which is also a Horizon project. And of course, we're involved in Civitas and Alice and all these different platforms that are important to us. So, back to the first work stream that I showed you earlier. These are some of the deployed innovations that are ongoing now. So we're still deploying innovations as we speak. So we'll have some kind of ex durante evaluations now, later this year. But I can tell you very shortly about the different measures and pilots that are now ongoing. We have a range of, let's say, pilots related to different types of mobility hubs in all of the 6 cities that I mentioned. We are doing both networks of multimodal hubs. We are doing more dynamic hubs. We are doing park and ride facilities. We are doing multifunctional hubs where let's say the focus is more on actually social efforts. We're also doing hubs where the main focus is on connecting micromobility together with the public transport offers, and so on and so forth. So there's a range of, let's say, efforts linked to different configurations of hubs. Furthermore, in all 6 cities, we're also focusing on freight. There's quite interesting efforts being done in, for example, Munich on cargo bike last mile deliveries, as well as in Bologna in Italy. We're developing now consolidation centers for urban logistics, for example, in Oslo. And we have some very quite interesting pilots ongoing now on cargo waste co-freight, for example, in Gothenburg. Finally, we are doing, now this is interesting, combined transport of people and goods in one vehicle, and that's very interesting. We have an ongoing pilot now in Hamburg and a pilot that is about to start in Oslo on that as well. And there's also some software development being done that on now on how you actually can combine this in one booking service. So quite interesting, where you actually try to combine passengers and freight in one service. And finally, we also have some work done on application integrations. In Gothenburg, that pilot is linked to parking and micromobility. In Oslo, that is linked to PT, public transport, and micromobility offers. And the whole point is to increase, let's say, the use of active modes and the use of public transport options in cities. When I mentioned some of these measures, what we focus quite a lot on is, of course, innovation. And we talk a lot about what type of innovations we're trying to develop. And in the project, we focus on these different types of innovations: social, governance, business, technology, and service. The definitions that you see here are the ones that we use, and they're from the OECD. And the pie chart shows the distribution of assumed innovations that we'll have at the end of the project. There's quite a lot. We started counting. We said, do we really have 100 innovations? And I thought, it sounds a bit much. So we will not probably have this number when we come to the end evaluation. I actually hope not, because then we might have done something wrong here. But the chart is interesting, simply because it shows you the likely distribution and the focus in the project, which is really on business innovation and governance innovation. The second work stream that I also mentioned, which is about fostering capabilities and capacities in urban nodes, is also very important to us. There we have what we call reflective monitoring place, where we look at how we can create long-lasting co-creation partnerships. And this is actually meaning how can the private and public sector work together beyond the scope of the project and continue to build on some of the things that we're now piloting. So we're trying to get out of that, let's say, pilot graveyard and into real implementations and upscaling through these efforts. Furthermore, we're focusing quite a lot on innovation capacity, meaning how can we equip the cities to do these things better, improved, more, easier, because actually trying to do innovation actions in cities is not always very easy. And finally, we're focusing on policy coherence, and this is actually very important, because all the while we look at these different measures, we realize that we sometimes need, let's say, more policy responses that are more integrated, let's say between land use planning and transport. And this is also something that we're looking at, and this is also a sort of a topic where we can see already now quite interesting results. I included some results from our ex-ante evaluation, and I would say the messages that we get on some of these topics are pretty average in terms of the perceived, let's say, capabilities right now. But one interesting thing that we already can see is that there's a lot of new, let's say, public-private collaborations coming up. There's a lot of focus on this in the project, so much that we want to develop a new policy paper on public-private collaboration. That was not intended, but we see the merits of it. And furthermore, we can already now see how the project can very specifically input into new policy responses in the participating cities. For example, when it comes to SUMPs or SULPs, when it comes to new regulation on micromobility or land use. So it's quite interesting. We have a pretty advanced, I would say, at least in my head, coming from political science, evaluation framework, which has these 3 layers. And the first level, the level 1, refers to these topics of society, governance, and technology that I already mentioned. And the second, of course, refers to let's say, the living lab co-creation processes and the work that we do on fostering capacities and capabilities. And the level 3, of course, refers to the result indicators. And the impact areas that you can see here are on that level 3. Now, these are not, this is not the full, let's say, KPI list or result indicator that we have in the project. We tried to choose a few for you to have a sort of a better view. And by the way, these percentages, these are estimations from our ex-ante evaluation. So there's, of course, some type of uncertainty linked to these numbers. But already now, I think, if I would say what the main point from this is, you can already now see that the potential for having tangible emission reductions, as well as a shift to more sustainable modes, is very real. So this is, let's say, this should be the main point. And I can see I'm running out of time. To support both evaluation efforts and decision-making efforts in the Living Lab, TNO, as a partner, has also developed 3 Living Labs. And these are essentially what-if scenarios that are applied to different measures. And I'm not going to go into any of these details now because I see I'm running out of time, but this is something that we use quite actively in the project, both for evaluation, but also for decision-making when choosing measures, and also when actually communicating to our policymakers. What makes sense in terms of deploying measures? Where do you get most bang for the buck? And of course, as always, this is not new to you, access to quality data is a challenge. The third and final work stream is the work that we do on the ScanMed Observatory. So this is an initiative by the Move 21 project. We hope that it will outlive the project and become a lasting legacy. But it's essentially a peer group for all urban nodes on the ScanMed corridor. And we're going from 20 to, I think, over 80 urban nodes now, once the TNT regulation has passed. And we want to be a platform and a peer group, and of course also useful to the Commission. And the reason why we do this is, of course, we see that there is a lot of big topics now, and a lot of new requirements coming for cities and urban nodes in the new regulation, and we need to deal with them. And this is a group where we can discuss how we deal with them. And maybe also be a layer between, let's say, the Commission and national member states. And in this regard, actually, I know I'm out of time. I wanted to invite all of you, potentially, to Oslo. We are hosting an urban nodes related conference on the 22nd and the 23rd of April. I believe the program is out on our website today. So if this sounded interesting, please have a look there. And I think the registrations will open later this week. So with that, I say thank you.
Thank you very much, Tina. What I found particularly interesting, and the links to the other projects also, which are following as the speakers, what you're talking about, the same service or using a service for passenger and freight, it also makes very nice links to the ULaaDS project, which will be presented in a moment also. And of course, the digital twins also links very well to the LEAD project, which is also following. And those expected impacts, even though you say that this is something that the percentages can go here and there, but I think they're very interesting targets to ambition to have, basically. So thanks for that. And then we move to our next project, which is Scale Up. And for this, we have two speakers, which is Katya Kishenko and Michiel Pene. Katya works as a communication and dissemination manager in the Smart Ways to Antwerp team for the city of Antwerp. Her core responsibilities lie in managing corporate communication, fostering synergies within the team, and driving dissemination efforts both at national and international levels. And additionally, she's also working on various European initiatives, such as Scale Up. And Michiel has been working for the city of Antwerp for the past 10 years, and he is the manager of the Smart Ways to Antwerp team, which connects the physical and digital layers of mobility to behavior change and to model shift. And he's also the coordinator of the Scale Up project. So I'll hand over now to Michiel.
So hi, I will tell you about Scale Up as coordinator of the project. And this is, let's say, the image we always use to explain a project. It's a project running between Antwerp, Turku in Finland, and Madrid in Spain, which is, let's say, a larger city, a mid-sized city, which is Antwerp, and a smaller city, Turku, which makes it, I think, interesting. We run until May 2025, which means we are now at, let's say, 2/3 of the project. So we are progressing quite fast, I think. Looking at this image, you see that there are two axes, a vertical one, a horizontal one. The vertical one, there we look at, let's say, governance or different levels of governance. So we are, let's say, the urban nodes or the cities. Then we look at the functional urban area around those cities. Because we believe, for example, to go towards a modal shift, it's not only the cities where you have to look at, but a lot has to happen in the functional urban area around it. And then we're also looking at the TNT, the European Transport Network. And I think on this subject, we're really collaborating with Move21. They are looking at their corridors, and I think we can really learn a lot about how also in our project, we can take into account this TNT dimension. When you look at the horizontal layer here, or the horizontal axis, there are actually three layers on that. There's the physical one, the digital one, the human one. We call those, let's say, the three layers that shape the multimodal mobility system. Physical one, where you can think about hubs, such as parking and rides, vehicles, for example, electric vehicles, the digital layer, which consists of data, and then the human layer and behavior. Because I think in our project, in the three cities, we're really trying to change people's behavior. We're trying to make a modal shift happen. And we think that integrating these three layers is super important. So we really try not to only look at data or only look at the physical layer or infrastructure. We look at all things combined and really hope that we can make a behavioral shift happen. So mapped on these two axes are our intervention fields, and in those are the 28 measures that we are working on in the three cities. So for example, for the governance intervention field, we're really looking at initiatives going on in cities that we could scale up to, for example, the functional urban area. And we see, of course, how we have to change those to make them more impactful. When we talk about our multimodal aspects, we're looking at parking rights, we're looking at places where, for example, last mile delivery is connected to other transport solutions. Then data, for example, mobility as a service. In the 3 cities, we're working on that, or ways to really look how, for example, shared mobility, how they, let's say the agreements we make as a city with shared mobility providers, how they really follow up on those, and if they really do what we agree with them. Then clean, safe, and inclusive is, for example, cycling. In Antwerp, we have one of the biggest electrical shared bicycle networks active, and it's like started from the scale-up project. In Turku, we're looking at cycling, for example, in the winter period, which is interesting. It's harder there to cycle during winter. And then behavior, as I told you, very important. There we're looking at events, communication campaigns, and so on. So I think it's cool to look at some project achievements here, and I give the floor to my colleague Katja, and she will talk us through those. And then I will come back to the conclusion. Here.
Lower, yes. Some project achievements so far. So as Michiel said, there are 28 measures in the project, so of course I don't have time to go into all of them. But we've selected, let's say, 1 measure per urban node to give you a bit of the idea of the variety of the measures that are part of the project and the intervention fields that Michiel also has mentioned. So for Antwerp, one of the things that we're doing within the project is that we've developed, or we are developing, a freight route planner. So really a route planner aimed at transport drivers and truck drivers to give them the option to find the most suitable route for their delivery, taking into account the complex urban context, so making it as safe and efficient as possible. Taking different parameters into account, which you can also see on the slide. So accessibility regulations, of course, very important. Also road hierarchy, so we really try to guide them or make them use the higher road network rather than the small streets, making it more safe for the living citizens there. It also takes into account tunnels and bridges, so taking into account height and weight regulations, live events, of course, so that they are not stuck there, they know the information up front. Very tight turns, also important, especially for the larger trucks. If they can have that information, it really makes it far more easy for them to find the best route to avoid problems on the road. And of course, school environments and school streets to avoid that at all costs for safety reasons. And here you can see an example of how such a route can look like on the route planner. So the blue line you can see gives the preferred route that we say this route you can take from A to B. And it, as you can see, it takes the bigger roads to take them there and not through the neighborhoods, let's say, taking the higher roads. It avoids a low tunnel. It's not really clear, but it avoids a low tunnel and makes the turn earlier to the destination. The circles that you see, they are the school environments, so as much as possible, those are avoided as well. And this way we try really to guide them in a safe way to their destination, as it is part of our mobility policy. It is a work in progress, so there are some challenges related to that. One of the biggest ones is that you can see there is a lot of parameters that are taken into account, but they're not all coming from a single source of data. So it really is a combination of sources of data that we're getting it from, which makes it difficult to, first of all, gather the information and also make sure that the quality is good enough, especially if it's sources that are not in the hands of the city itself. And secondly, of course, freight transport does not stop at the city borders. It is much wider than that. So if we look at the Antwerp transport region as a whole, it consists of more than 30 municipalities. So how do we make sure that for all of those municipalities, we have the right data in the right form and with the right quality? So it is a bit of a challenge. And lastly, of course, the end goal is that drivers are using the route planner and are following the suggested routes. So how do we convince them to do that? It's not that easy, and it is something that we really need to take a lot of effort in to make sure that they are using it and following the routes. Then another example from Turku, more on the behavior change topic, let's say, so another intervention fields. A very interesting pilot project that they are doing right now is a mobility activation model for children, schools and children. Very nice, so to really convince them to use the bike more often through organizing skill development sessions, making them, learning them how to bike, and also very important to take the parents also on board, so also convince them of the benefits of the bike. It's really a nice project, and related to that, they are also installing bicycle services in the neighborhoods, so also making it really accessible for people to use the bike together then with the school program, really making it an integrated approach. It's something that is running right now, so really looking forward to the results. I think it's a very nice and interesting project. But as always, also some challenges there. Michiel mentioned it already, so the fall and winter time in Turku is quite challenging. So how do you convince people to still cycle despite those environmental challenges? And of course, if we're looking at a target group of school children and parents, it is quite challenging. You are dealing with the sense of comfort of people, the sense of safety, also very important when talking about children. So it makes it a bit difficult as a target group to reach them, but I think the rewards are really worth it, because in the long term it tends to be quite effective if you can have children already convinced of the behavior that you want, and also the parents, of course, because you can't have the one without the other. And also a very important aspect for success in this story is cooperation. It's kind of the focus of Scale Up as a whole, cooperation between different stakeholders. And in this project, it really comes together very nice, because you have the schools that are involved, you have the city, you have the sports department, you have the parents, a lot of intermediary groups, and it's really nice to see how they can all work together in a project like this. And the first results already are very positive in reaction-wise, so that's very nice to see. And thirdly, Madrid, more on the topic of intermodality, which is also one of the intervention fields in Scale Up, and a really tangible result there, or project achievement, is their portable electric bike docking station, which is quite unique since it is aimed at electrical bikes. So it has its own power source and can also be externally powered, making it very easy to deploy it at events when needed to really convince people to come in a more active way. And related to that, they're also expanding their Bicimat system, which is the city sharing bike system, integrating it, let's say, in their total intermodality hubs and multimodal mobility policy. So really making it a total picture instead of just different parts of it. That's it. Those were a few very short examples of the measures that we're doing in Scale Up. There's much more, of course, so if you are interested, make sure to reach out or follow the project for more information on the other measures. Then it's back to Michiel.
So I will quickly talk about what will happen beyond Scale Up. Of course, we'll have to see that at the end of the project. So what I did now was looking back at what we defined at the beginning. And when it comes to governance, I think we will find ways to better integrate different governance levels and to maximize impact of, let's say, our transport policies on those different levels. When looking at economy, for example, in Antwerp, we strongly believe that keeping the city accessible with less congestion is essential to let economy grow. When looking at, for example, data and mobility as a service, we really see that it's essential to let public and private stakeholders work together. For health, of course, more active mobility, more cycling, even in winter in Turku, will have a positive health impact. Then, to conclude, how will we make our, let's say, our legacy tangible? Since I think a week or two, three, we have 7 fellow cities, and we're very happy with those. We were only searching for 3, and in the end, we ended up with 7. With those, we will share our insights, our knowledge during webinars, during in-person events, and we look forward to, spread what we learned with them, but also to learn from them. I think this will be a very interesting way of, cooperating. At the end of the project, there will be some deliverables that we will share with you, with everyone, in which we will really explain what we learned during our project, and also give ways to implement what we learned yourself. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michiel and Katja. I found particularly interesting what you were saying about the freight route planner in Antwerp and the cooperation that has to take place with this. I think you mentioned in one slide there are 30 municipalities working together on that. That's quite an achievement. And also getting these parameters and all the different data points in there. So I think that's very interesting. So thanks a lot on that. Then we will move to our next presentation and our next speaker. So this is the LEAD project, and speaking on behalf of LEAD is Sergio Fernandez Balaguer. Sergio has a master's in forest engineering from the Polytech University of Madrid and is an expert in GIS and remote sensing from the University also of Madrid. And since 2008, he's been at EMT Madrid, which is the public company owned by the city of Madrid and also has the largest public transport operator of Spain. And currently he is the lead of the international department of EMT Madrid. So I'll hand over to you now, Sergio.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. It's a bit stressful to be in an afternoon session, so I hope that the next slides will be fun enough for you to keep awake. The good point is that my presentation is about a project which has been already finally and successfully approved and closed by CINEA. So we're very glad about it. So the outcomes and the results that you will see in the next slides are really, we think, quite tangible ones. So let's go for it. And I have followed the template very strictly, so I have even the transition slides in between. So LEAD. Okay, it responds to this low-emission adaptive last-mile logistics supporting on-demand economy through digital twins. It sounds a bit complicated, and actually I must admit that when we became involved, we were a bit kind of afraid of, oops, a digital twin. What we had in mind was this type of fancy digital twins that you may find in internet that, I don't know if there is anyone here from Japan or Singapore, this sort of 3D model of the city, like it looks very futuristic. So that was not the idea. Actually, digital twin, from our own understanding, is more about simulating tools, modeling tools that add all the comprehensiveness of what a digital twin is. But I must admit, to deploy or develop a digital twin with this fancy interface, we might have the need of at least triple budget, Yannick, than the one we had in the project. So it started in June 2020. It took 36 months plus an extension of 4 months because we had to deep into especially the dissemination outcomes of the project and some evaluation. Excuse me. And it ended in September, last September. You can see all the different partners that cover a very wide range of stakeholders. You may think, what's doing EMT Madrid as a public transport operator involved in logistics? Okay, don't panic. We as a public transport operator, we don't have any intention of becoming a logistic provider of anything. The point is that beyond the bus service, the one we operate, which is the main one, we also operate the bike sharing system, of the city, as Michael and Katja mentioned. And we also manage the tow trucks, the cable car, the charging infrastructure for electric vehicles, and parking facilities. We have 28 Plaza Mobility Hub across the city with more than 12,500 parking lots. So these spaces may play a big role in logistics, such as being used as consolidation centers or cross-docking stations. So the idea behind was to, okay, let's work in perhaps optimizing the use of these spaces. And then you can see many stakeholders trying to address, well, different questions, because as a customer, we want a responsive system with customized products in terms of home delivery, for instance, last mile delivery. As an industry, you want an instant delivery. We want to be competitive and to really make a very efficient delivery. And then cities, on the contrary, we're just afraid of facing the negative consequences of all that. So the idea behind was to develop logistic solutions, trying to combine the best for all these three approaches. That's why we have logistic operators, we have cities, we have research institutes, we have transport authorities, etc., etc. The objectives were designing from zero to co-design, better say, different value cases. So on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see kind of the cycle. So starting from defining these value cases based on the local context. Each of the 6 cities participating in the project, they each live in lab, focused on a very specific matter. So for instance, in Madrid, we were focusing on the use of a urban consolidation center to optimize last mile delivery. In The Hague, they were focusing on what they call the innovation district, areas with trying to combine different logistic platforms. In Lyon, they were also thinking about an area of the city, Lyon Confluence, with high activity, with big companies as well, and also thinking about how to optimize this last mile delivery in the area. Porto was purely private, a big retailer company, one of the biggest in Portugal, optimizing deliveries, combining with electric charging. Budapest, thinking both at macro and mesoscopic approaches, thinking about the limitations of low-emission zones, but also thinking about the use of urban consolidation centers. And Oslo, how to optimize deliveries by taking advantage of the public transport network and crowd shipping. So it's quite diverse. Then the next step was to define the digital twins for these value cases and to deploy physical pilots that would benefit from the use of the digital twin, and at the same time will be useful to calibrate and optimize this digital twin and to test really the accuracy and how useful is the use of a digital twin for optimizing logistics. And last but not least, well, defining some kind of roadmaps or lessons learned or scalability of these solutions. Results. So the first one would be this demonstrated and validated, since 1 month ago, I need glasses. Yeah. Demonstrated and validated project concepts and tools in these 6 intervention areas, or the 6 living labs. That is something quite unique because we've been following this approach of living labs. Something relevant is been using what we call communities of practice. So since the very beginning, we searched for the different stakeholders involved, no matter if they were private or public companies or entities, operators, associations, to go hand by hand with the definition of these digital twins. And that has been really extremely useful. Then all these measures can be adopted by any city, no matter which one are you talking about. More than 20 events, publications, more than 5,000 stakeholders reached, a massive online open course that any one of you can access to with 5 different modules. Also, cooperation with the Civitas Learning Center, this adoption roadmap also feeding onto the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plans methodology, the transferability platform with 10 additional follower cities. From a technical point of view, the Open Digital Twinning platform, which is really interesting because it's open to anyone. I mean, you can use it. And one of the main outcomes is this model library with 20 different modules that you can pick up and tailor-made your own digital twin. This is published, open source components in GitHub, so you can also access and take a look. I must admit that some of the challenges, and it is within the conclusions of my presentation, is the lack of skills, mostly in cities, how to deal with this type of new tools, to be trained to use it, because it's not that intuitive, I must admit. It's not something that you just access as if you were buying a pair of shoes in any website. You need some training. You need to know which type of data used to feed on digital twin. Also, the accuracy of data is also relevant. So, well, that will be on the part of the conclusions. But just to finalize these achievements, the last one would be, and this is also very tangible, and I think from the European Commission point of view, very interesting. We have some patent granted of the dynamic routing for electric delivery vehicles. So that is a patent that has been granted. We've been going through this approach. I already mentioned this model library and the data assets in order to get the simulations. One of the main achievements is this flexibility I was already mentioning, that you can really tailor-make your digital twin. Of course, you need some technical assistance for this. So that's why within the project we have had technical partners such as Inlecom or Zaragoza Logistics Center to help us in this process. But it ensures scalability if needed. Of course, they are not perfect. For instance, in the case of Madrid, we've been focusing on parcels, but the truth is that a big part of the logistic challenge in the city is all about the HoReCa channel. What to do with all this delivery of food and drinks, and especially thinking about how many bars and restaurants and shops we have in Madrid, which is a really dense, a very dense part of the mobility of the city. So this is also some of the outcomes. This is a screenshot of how it looks like, the real platform, the digital twin platform. And well, the idea is to help, especially city officials, decision makers, how to get the best out of data-driven decisions, I would say, even if it's a bit redundant. Many times you take decisions that really affect the life of everyone without clear evidence on how this will affect your daily life or the economic activity of the city. So the idea behind is, okay, if you have a basic bunch of data, you can fit the digital twin and you can get some evidence on how this will work. And that is what we have been doing in order to help, on one hand, the private logistic operator to demonstrate, hey, look, if you shift to an electric vehicle and you start having this two-echelon approach for the delivery by using an electric vehicle, despite the fact that you will have to invest in an electric vehicle, you will gain a lot of efficiency, you will reduce emissions, you probably will gain also more flexibility for your deliveries. And if you don't believe me, just use this, get the data, test it, and you will check it. So that has been really, really interesting for us. And this is what I was mentioning about the patents. We got for this EV charging scheduling algorithm, that's the dynamic routing, combining the delivery plus the charging processes, which has been granted in Belgium and Greece already, and it's in the process in Germany, France, and the US. So I think this is one of the, I would say, from the commercial point of view, one of the most interesting outcomes of this project. Also, in terms of evaluation, we've been following the STAR logistics methodology in order to provide some sort of sustainability rating to provide insight for decision makers. So basically, by using a scenario-based approach, some weighting, but different sustainability criteria, and also different severity levels and KPIs, what you get basically is how sustainable the solution you are assessing through the digital twin is. So that also helps taking decisions. In terms of cross-project cooperation, beyond ULaaDS, that you will know later on, and Senator, which are the sister projects of LEAD, we've been cooperating mostly with ALICE, the Alliance for Logistics Innovation, through collaboration in Europe, but also Living EU, the European Network of Living Labs, the World Economic Forum. We have provided insight for a report in the use of digital twins in cities. The EIT Urban Mobility, actually the Madrid Living Lab solution, the Urban Consolidation Center, was selected as one of the best practices in 2022. Yep, and many other projects, such as also Move 21. And then regarding mid to long expected impacts of the project. Well, the most immediate one is I don't intend you to read these tiny numbers, but is here it's all the KPIs collected for the 6 living labs in terms of different parameters. But what I would like to remark is that this positive impact of the use of digital twins and this approach. For instance, in the case of Madrid, which is the one I know by heart because I've been also coordinating it internally, the operator, the logistic operator, got reductions of 33% in kilometers driven and more than 14% in delivery time, which is a lot of money for them, actually, when they monetize that into tangible results as a private operator. But as you can see, most of the cities got very, very nice indicators. In terms of supporting SAMPs and SALPs, we've been, we think we have provided meaningful input to these 5 steps, 4, 6, 7, 11, 12, by either developing these value use cases as scenarios and models, defining successful KPIs, co-designing specific solutions and using the digital twins, and also updating the models with real-life data. And now that I talk about data, let's get to the final slide about recommendations. I guess I'm on time? 1 minute, perfect. From beyond this lack of skills and training that is also pointed out in these recommendations slide, you can't use a digital twin unless you have good data. So, data quality is fundamental. Tackling data sharing is also key. So you need to create first kind of a trust environment. This community of practice have been very useful, talking directly and very closely with private companies as well. Sometimes cities, we don't even know that we have data. So we need to check internally what type of data do we have and if it's meaningful or really useful for anything. But then private operators, sometimes they do not have either data, or if they have it, they are reluctant to share it because of perhaps sharing it with another operator, which is my potential competitor. So it's something very tricky. Interoperability of the data. As far as I didn't know that before the project, but apparently within the logistics sector, many operators use different data sets, different formats, and precisely for the purpose of kind of maintaining their own, I wouldn't say secret, but trying to be as competitive as possible towards other potential competitors. You need to be realistic with the available data. It is also very good to take advantage of kind of making a benchmark of what is already existing in terms of these digital twins. And again, I would like to emphasize here, don't think of a digital twin as a 3D model of the city, very fancy and futuristic, like a Matrix film. No, digital twins can be much simpler and fulfill all the expectations. The interface is just a part of it. And then having experts. So again, linking it with this final message of training, of skills, of capacity building. So if you are curious about it, I highly recommend you to take a look to the massive online open course, which is available in internet, also at the Civitas Learning Center. And I think with this, I get to the end of my presentation. Yep.
Thank you very much, Sergio. I thought it was particularly interesting what you were saying about the patents that you have from an exploitation perspective from the project. This is very nice to have, which I saw that was already approved in Belgium and in Greece and in being requested also in the US and France and so on. So also for projects which are finished or near to being finished, there's also resources available such as the Horizon Results Boosters, and from Horizon Europe and Horizon 2020, there are also platforms and resources to help with this type of exploitation and dissemination. So thank you very much on that. Then we move to our next project, which is ULaaDS. Here we would also have two speakers, but one speaker, Karsten Hulsman, had to send his apologies. But however, we have with us here Howard Weir. Howard is a researcher at the Institute of Transport Economics in Oslo. And his background is in social sciences with a Master of Arts in Global Environment Policy from American University School of International Service in Washington, D.C. And his work primarily focuses on urban logistics and specifically the use of light electric freight vehicles, city hubs, and the role of municipalities. Howard, I'd like to hand over to you. And you have the timer there.
Thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction. Well, Sergio said he was nervous about going in the last session, so you can imagine how I feel going as the last speaker in the last session, just before the end. Yes, so I'll work quickly. So ULaaDS, it's kind of a mouthful, Urban Logistics as an On-Demand Service. So for a brief overview of the project, it's the smallest project here, just over 3 million. There's 25 partners. The project went over 42 months, so we also received an extension of 6 months. This was primarily due to some of the impacts of COVID. We also had 2 partners go bankrupt early in the project, which created a lot of challenges for us and some shuffling around early on, but we found some replacements. But as you can see, we had a sort of similar structure to some of the other projects. We had 3 lighthouse cities, we called them, Mechelen, Bremen, and Groningen. And these cities are where all of the research trials took place. And then we had our lighthouse cities, our satellite cities, Edinburgh, Bergen, Alba Iulia, and Rome. And we had a lot of exchanges with them through webinars and site visits, so they could try to exchange knowledge with us and see if any of the solutions could be applicable for them in their local context. So, what were we trying to do in ULaaDS? It's about urban logistics, but it was about adopting zero-emission solutions. And there's many ways to attack that problem. We chose to look at it from a policy perspective, and we're sort of driven by, at the outset of the project, just 13% of cities had some kind of urban logistics plan formalized. And we tackled this problem through 4 different objectives. The first 2 were looking at different ways of understanding stakeholders, garnering support and collaboration, and deploying the different solutions. And the objectives 3 and 4 were focused on replicating those results, learning what have we done, how can we take those forward into actionable policy. So for the first 2 objectives on collaboration and deployment, we had 7 research trials in ULaaDS, and they split into one of these 2 categories, either collaborative and shared urban logistics, or integrated passenger and freight networks. So things like cargo hitching, which is what we call the movement of freight and people in the same vehicles, a little bit what was being tried in Move 21, or it could be a hub that has logistics functions in addition to transporting people. And then we had collaborative and shared on the other side, and all of the trials had one or more of these elements with them. So we can start looking at Bremen. Bremen, the first trial was, and I won't be able to talk too much about them, but I'll try to go through some of the highlights. So we tried containerized last mile delivery in Bremen. And this was using these Reitel bikes, which is a heavy duty cargo bike. And there were 2 micro hubs deployed in Bremen, one in the city center and one a little more on the outskirts. What was interesting about these bikes is they allowed the possibility to deliver pallets. And so normally when you see deliveries by cargo bike, you're thinking things maybe no more than 5, 6, 7 kilograms. But here the average shipment weight was 70 kilograms. And we found that this was actually able to replace truck movements in the city because you could deliver these pallets to the micro hub, and then these bikes transloaded the pallets and avoided those movements in the city center. This trial is still going on. One of the micro hubs, we were never able to get enough volume going through it, so it didn't have a strong business case, but the other one in the city center actually had another hub added onto it, focused more on parcel delivery, and that is continuing even without subsidies from the city. The second trial was cargo bike sharing and private micrologistics, and this was a free service to the citizens for them to use for their whatever they wanted to do with the bike over the course of their day. They could rent the bike for free for up to 2 days, and they were stationed at several different points around the city. What we saw after surveying the users of these bikes is that over half of their trips were replacing car trips, which shows a lot of potential. They were also taking trips that they wouldn't have otherwise, so this was creating new possibilities for people that they wouldn't have otherwise. And finally, in Bremen, we had the cargo hitching simulation. This was done by Via Van, or Via now. They, in many cities, have sort of a supplement to public transport running in later hours and things like that. We simulated 4 scenarios in the project, looking at different ways to move freight and people using the same vehicles in an on-demand way. And there were some modest savings for costs and emissions, and it could use 1 fewer vehicle or 20% fewer vehicles, depending on how many vehicles you had. But the service levels were difficult to keep them within sort of a tolerable range for the passengers. So you'd have to, the routing was quite challenging. So it would be interesting to look further with scenarios that maybe had either fixed parcels or fixed people, instead of having both as on-demand. In Groningen, we had 2 trials, shared vehicles for shopkeepers. So this was 3 electric vehicles, or 3 zero-emission vehicles, were made available to shopkeepers from the Groningen City Club, who were very involved from the outset in developing and sort of where the vehicles should be placed, how they should be used. There was constant communication between them. So they were sort of in the lead here. And this provided a lot of insights into what they actually needed, what type of vehicles were useful, where they should be placed. The van was by far the most popular because it provided something they didn't have already. They gave them more capacity to do some of the tasks they needed to do. And this was also done in combination with Groningen is very active in sort of starting to restrict movements in the city center by fossil vehicles. And so these types of solutions allows these shopkeepers to continue their business. During the trial, this was a free service for them, but again, this trial is also continuing under a paid model, and the shopkeepers are looking to scale up to have a larger number of vehicles so they can have access to them more often. The second trial, this was intended to be a sort of a white label parcel locker at a mobility hub. A lot of things didn't go as planned here. There was a lot of regulatory issues, permitting issues, getting electricity installed to go to the parcel locker. All of these things created such delays, and at the same time it was realized that they didn't really have a good political framework for working with white labeled parcel lockers in the city. And so a parcel locker framework was developed, and it was delivered just in December. And to do this, there was benchmarking of best practices, and spatial analysis was done on the city of Groningen to identify where these lockers could be placed to sort of fill in the private network, to create more sort of equity with accessibility for white label parcel lockers. Mechelen was our final city. Again, a city that's done a lot to sort of limit the access at certain times of day for fossil fuel vehicles. Here, the first trial was combined parcel pickups. And so it was an attempt to get UPS and bpost to put both of their packages on a local bike courier that would then take it the last mile. This trial also didn't go as planned. It went through a number of iterations and provided a lot of lessons on collaboration and a solution that was maybe not a burning need. And so eventually it just sort of fell apart and never quite got off the ground. So this so the experience from this for the city, they're taking that into multiple other projects now. So it was a sort of an interesting experience for them, but it sort of shows, I think, this idea of collaborative logistics, how difficult it is to enact. The next trial was cargo hitching with an autonomous vehicle, and this was the most experimental of the trials. So there was an autonomous shuttle from Easy Mile, which drove in sort of a circuit in a business park on the outskirts of the city. Installed on board that was a parcel locker. And so this was sort of a proof of concept of both learning how driving an autonomous vehicle would be. They had to remove bushes and things like that to make the track available. What are people's perceptions of it? We saw that people were very skeptical of the technology at first and quickly became used to it and positive towards it after just a few minutes on board. And then the parcel locker itself, we learned about sort of what is the kind of interface you need to have. On a route like this, it doesn't make a lot of logistical sense, but in terms of how is it for the driver or the courier to load up the parcel locker, how long does it take, how long does it delay a stop? These are sort of some of the things we were able to explore with this trial. And so if you go to the next half of the project, the replication and dissemination, like some of the other projects, we've been to many of these conferences, are active online in webinars, have worked with LEAD and Senator. Some of our cities, Bremen and Groningen, are EGAM members and have worked with Alice. And so I've been sort of active from the beginning, trying to sort of get the word out about what we're doing. But as you see, it's status ongoing, and that's because we're still in the final month of the project because of that 6-month extension I mentioned earlier. So we have quite a few deliverables that are still to come. And these are, so for example, the replication webinars with the satellite cities have just sort of wrapped up now. And trying to figure out how we can take the lessons we've learned in ULaaDS forward to other cities. We have deliverables related to policy and regulation. We have a framework on strategic decision-making for SUMPs and SULPs that's coming out at the end of the month, as well as the final decision of our decision support toolbox. And so this is sort of how we see playing into the midterm and long-term expected impacts of the project. This is taken from the grant agreement and is looking at sort of some of the measures we were interested in influencing. You can see the number of urban mobility plans incorporating our guidelines, stakeholders engaged at local fora. All of these things we feel that we're on track and that we are influencing how cities are thinking about logistics, and we feel that was the sort of the need that we were filling in this project. And we want to see, going forward, sort of the application and implementation of these solutions. We've seen that, especially sort of space use efficiency. So one of the things we explored a lot was the size of the vehicle related to how much weight it's delivering in a city area. For example, the cargo bikes in Bremen, when you're able to replace a large truck in a pedestrian street with a small bike, it gives a lot. And then we were also, the stakeholder involvement was really critical to this project, involving stakeholders early on to figure out what are barriers, but also what are avenues of cooperation. How can you take these things forward and into an actionable framework? And the last thing I wanted to underline is that this is a city-led project. So the knowledge and the experience that the cities have gained during the development of this project, that is something that they're going to be able to take forward into other endeavors. And then, lastly, here's our mascot, Uli. So I think that QR code links to a video about the project. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Howard. I noticed also in terms of your impacts, the ambition is to get ULaaDS guidelines or recommendations into SULPs and SUMPs of other cities. So I think that's a very good target to have through replicators and through dissemination from the project. So thanks a lot for that. So now I would like to hand over to our question and answer round, and for that will be moderated by Ivo Cré from POLIS. Thank you.
Yes, I'll take this from here. I understand Xavier is willing to carry the roving microphone, so we can take it for questions from the room. Before starting, I just want to test your knowledge of the jargon that has been used. People refer to SUMPs. Who knows what a SUMP is? Just to check that. So it's a Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan for the CCAM or the drivetrain people in the room, just to make sure. There's also a SULP, the logistics plan. And we've heard also about EGUM, and EGUM is the expert group on urban mobility. It's an in the comitology and group that works on the implementation of the new urban mobility framework. Just that we are clear that everybody is with us on the jargon. So you heard two speakers say that it's stressful to be at the end of the day. Imagine managing a Q&A at the end of the day. So, but we'll do our best. So I saw a hand raised. Please, sir, go ahead. The microphone is on your way. Can you introduce yourself and also maybe highlight who you want to address with your question? Yeah.
My name is Marco Tella. I will try to wake up a little bit with some question. And by the way, I was aware of what was SUMP. I was not aware of what was SALP, but I just asked ChatGPT and I got the answer. So no, I wanted to highlight this because I did not see. I saw a lot of interesting things, but I saw a little bit of. I was a little bit expecting some numbers also maybe. Did you in your projects? The question is for all the projects, but you can answer whoever wants. Did you make an estimation of in your cities, the cities that you have targeted? What is the impact of the first and last mile delivery, which normally is known to be quite demanding, and which kind of measures you have implemented to reduce it?
Yeah, interesting question. We are working on these topics because we understand they have an impact, and also improving the situation will have a positive impact. Who knows in the panel what the urgency is, what the size of the problem is, and the trends also? Is it getting more complicated or better?
Okay,
Sergio.
I will break the ice, though I'm not 100% sure about the figures, but in Madrid, according to the last Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan and the last sort of inventory that the city did, I think on average, within the city there are around 12.3 million trips per day, including all modes of transport, so including walk-in and public transport and everything. And out of those, if I recall, urban logistics accounts around something like, in peak hour, something around, and please take it this like, very serious, because I don't remember exactly, but I think it was around 20% of the traffic, around 15% of the NOx, and a little bit around 12% of greenhouse gas emissions, if I recall. I should double check. However, the truth is that most of these trips, which are done in peak hours, happens always at the same times. There are conflicts, especially in pedestrian areas. Most of European cities are turning into pedestrian, many parts of the cities, which at the same time turns them into very commercial or active, very active, commercially speaking. So that brings a challenge how to deal with all the delivery in these commercial areas, whereas at the same time they are pedestrian. And normally pedestrians also walk at the very early in the morning when you go to work, and then in the evening, where most of the times you need to deliver things to shops, to and from shops. And then on top of that you have the home delivery, which experienced like an incredibly exponential growth during and after the pandemic. And the city was not ready for that, especially thinking that most of ourselves, we became a shop. We demand immediate services, no matter what time of the day, and we also deliver from our houses. So the city is really not prepared to have every single available public space in front of every single house or flat or building as a loading and unloading base any time of the day. So yeah, I think it's a big challenge. But I don't have exact figures. What I can tell you, and it's available on internet, the City Council approved a few months ago under the framework of the new Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, which was approved, the new one, in July 2022. And I think it was a few months ago approved kind of an extension of it, just focusing on freight, so the sort of Sustainable Urban Logistic Plan. It's called DUM 360. From DUM, from Distribución Urbana de Mercancías, and you can check there all the numbers, all the figures, all the measures that are planned to be implemented in the next few years. Yeah.
Okay, Antwerp or Oslo, you have something to contribute on this topic? Yeah. This question?
Well, I think I would just like to echo what Sergio said. We don't have exact numbers. And I think it varies also from city to city to what extent you have tried to even estimate this. And I think the numbers are better if you ask about, let's say, urban logistics as such. So the amount of freight in a city, I think we have a better grasp of that than what your question was specifically on first mile and last mile. Then it gets a bit difficult because then we're actually quite dependent upon data. From those who provide those services, and that is not always forthcoming. It's easier for us to count vehicles accessing certain areas. I mean, we do have very detailed accounts of vehicle types, and when they access the city center, for example, or certain areas, so we can amass from that already quite, good statistics in terms of what the urban freight as such is. But for the urban first mile and last mile, it gets a bit more complicated. I think as a general rule, most urban areas in Europe, and I can use Oslo as an example, are expected to have an increase in this type of freight, first mile and last mile. I can use an example from Oslo, from a specific consolidation center that we have that has, during the pandemic, increased its business by over 800%. And it went down a bit after the pandemic, but it's more or less stayed on that same level. And we also have projections, actually, that were delivered to the City of Oslo, to our climate agency, that were actually done by colleagues from Howard at the Transport Economic Institutes, who also say it's very, difficult to put an exact number, but we're expected these to grow, and that was part of the, let's say, the prognosis going forward for goods logistics. I don't know, I'm putting you on the spot, Howard, if you want to say something on that as well.
I can talk a little about why also it's so difficult to manage. I don't know if you... Familiar with services like Foodora and Volt and things like that use their own private vehicles, and you see also, so what is a logistics vehicle when you're counting these vehicles going in? If you have sort of a loop detector set up that maybe registers the size of the vehicle, at what point does it become a logistics vehicle? Many of these vehicles, so you have the big actors, they're quite easy to count, but the sort of smaller actors, which are a major proportion of the goods moving through cities, are essentially invisible. And so you can do, manual counts. You can have sort of ANPR cameras and things like that, but that is legally difficult some places. Or maybe you could have some sort of vision classification system to better understand where freight movements are happening. In terms of the last mile, it is extremely expensive. But data, as has been repeated several times here, is often lacking, is difficult to have it shared. So you would think that there was a much better understanding of freight movements in cities than there actually is.
Interesting. So we moved from a question, what is the size, and now we are down to the question, how can we measure? Antwerp, can you add to that? Yep.
Actually, it's bit the same for us, so we don't have exact numbers on freight. We have ANPR cameras for our low emission zone, which can track, let's say, the type of vehicles going in and out of the city. But when you look at, let's say, a modal split which includes freight, we don't have it. We did research with the kilometers vehicles travel in the city, also to see like what type of vehicles are mostly used for freight-related movements. And then we see that, for example, cargo bags are a very small percentage of it, but we don't have exact numbers. It's interesting because like the parcel delivery companies, you can really track where your parcel is at the moment. Like 3 stops has to be done before it's at your door. But if you ask those companies to share this data, we don't get it. So we don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, Ivo.
Yeah.
I just reminded, because as, this person was asking about figures, about a new project that was recently approved by CINEA, which belongs to the mission cities. It's called Mobilities for EU. It's quite a big one. EMT is involved, and it's about urban freight, a big part of it. One of the partners is Mercamadrid. Mercamadrid is like the biggest wholesale market in Spain. Just to give you an idea, it covers more than 222 hectares, so it's bigger than Monaco, and it provides fresh food, meaning fruit, vegetables, fish, and meat, for more than 12 million people. The area of influence is 400 kilometers around Madrid, so even people or markets from Valencia come to buy to Madrid. The fish market is the second biggest one in the world after Tokyo. I guess it's around 15,000 trucks get in to this Mercamadrid area every single day. More than 8,000 people work directly, direct employees, within Mercamadrid. So yeah, freight is a big challenge. And perhaps in upcoming RTR conferences, we will be also invited to present some results and figures on how to deploy sustainability in all this. But it's just to give you an idea, and we are just talking about fresh food. Then on top of that, you need to keep summing up everything that we need in our daily lives. So.
Okay. Tina, you have a comment, but you have to include in your answer also something where Oslo is the biggest in the world or the second biggest in the world. Then,
No.
okay, yeah.
Okay, so I might disappoint you. I just wanted to, because I just thought it would be important to nuance when I heard also my colleagues on the panel speak. Access to data has been a problem for a long time. I think we all can relate to that, but I think it's also, important to nuance that we're starting to see a shift in that. So you have, let's say, medium-sized companies and delivery companies who are now actually seeing the merits of having that conversation with cities, at least some of them, at least this is what we're experiencing in Oslo, and also having this dialogue directly with goods owners, so big companies who don't necessarily are the ones that move the freight, but that are goods owners. So there's something that is now shifting in that landscape, but this has been, let's say, a bit of a problem for quite a while. But I think let's see if there's something now moving. I remain optimist.
Okay, thank you. Carlo, you have a question. Please introduce yourself and raise the question to a specific panelist.
Yeah. Carlo Baghi, formerly researcher on urban logistics. Let me just humbly remind that it's published since 1 year the New Mobility Partners Survey on Urban Logistics, a study funded by the European Commission, with a survey large enough to cover the story of almost 12,000 vehicle days, all over 16 the main 16 European greater cities. There are plenty of data on fleets, on title of transport, on fueling, etc. I don't have a link here now, but you can easily find it. It is still the most recent one, as far as I know.
Thank you. So that was a comment, so maybe also to match local data sets with higher level data sets and research that's been done or studies that's been done at EU level. There's a question in the back. A gentleman raised his hand.
Hi, Karim Hassan for the Catalonia government. Thank you for your presentations. A question more for Howard and the ULaaDS project, but maybe anybody who's dealt with policy can chip in. Insight on the friction or what can be improved or what the policymakers learned from implementing the demos and the pilots that you guys developed. Because I have the impression that there's a reuniting all the stakeholders and getting them, aligning them is what is the hardest bit, and it's only the city that can do that, really. That's at the center of the operations. So if you can elaborate on that, please.
So, policy take-up of the project? Yep.
Can try. So, because, for example, we were trying to, change the way things were done, reallocate space, take away space for some things, add it to others. If you're taking away parking spots, people are not happy. And so it was, I think as you mentioned, the stakeholder involvement, identifying who is interested in the project early on. We developed what we called a collective targeting system for the stakeholders, which is essentially a survey where we went through different statements and they sort of ranked the different choices. This is to identify sort of common areas of interest or common challenges they have. But there's also, at a certain point, these cities are, I think this is important to pair, if you're introducing something new, something has to change. And the cities have to change and are changing in many cases. They're becoming more pedestrianized, maybe they're having some sort of access restriction, or they're making a longer shortcut or a shortcut for smaller vehicles that's suddenly making that a more attractive option. So there's also this sort of political will that needs to be paired with any of these kind of actions. For example, also in Bremen, the election happened just recently that was sort of pro-car in a lot of ways. And that, I think some of my colleagues there were worried was going to negatively impact some of the changes they're hoping to enact in the city center and sort of the forward momentum they have. I'm not sure if I've answered your question.
Okay. Sergio, please.
Yeah. I'm not sure it's kind of this story about the chicken and the egg, but the truth is that the project has provided evidence about, for instance, how useful is the use of micro-logistic hubs within the city center especially. So that has provided input for this new sustainable urban logistic plan of the city that was approved a few months ago, this DAM 360. But I can tell you that also this approach we have followed in Madrid has gone deeper into even our own strategic plan at EMT as managers of public parking facilities. So now we have the commitment of developing micro hubs at each one of our parking facilities. We have started with the easy ones, of course, but the idea is to keep replicating the solution and also helping the city achieving the goals which are included within the sustainability strategy in Madrid 360, which is kind of the big framework for any sustainability action in the city.
Okay. Maybe the case of Antwerp, I think there's a big political buy-in to this kind of project, and I think also the politician we know from Antwerp is also very engaged with the community. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So I like the part where you said that the city should take a role in aligning stakeholders. I think that's true.
Yeah.
And I also think in Antwerp, like my team, the Smart Waste Antwerp team is really working on that. So when we were, for example, developing our sustainable urban logistics plan, it's from within my team that we really started the conversation with logistics companies in Antwerp to listen to them, to see what they wanted to find again in our plan. And I think we have been really able to, form the plan together with them. Also, we're also really looking at companies in Antwerp that have solutions for sustainable mobility. We're supporting them with project calls, so we're funding them. We're really trying to listen to them and really try to find ways to interact with the market, let's say, the private market, to make them develop solutions for Antwerp. So, and I think this kind of working together with stakeholders is super important. And the city is indeed, I think, the right, let's say, level to really work on this.
Yeah. Tina, can you reflect on that? You have in your function description that you work quite closely with the vice mayor or the executive mayor on this topic. But can you also tell something about how you try to bring that political dimension to the corridor and to the activity across the nodes you are working in? And not only, or is that a question that is too far-reaching?
No, I was just wondering if it's linked to this about how you build on, let's say, how do you work with policymakers and how you get the, what's their role in this and aligning stakeholders. Maybe that's two different questions. I'm not sure, but I see in Move 21 time and again how this, let's say, collaboration schemes between public and private entities crops up as one of the, let's say, key topics that we did not entirely foresee when we wrote the proposal. But it is an important one, and I think many cities have come quite far in seeing that we need to have this, let's say, improved dialogue with the private sector. But it is a jump of faith for some civil servants because there are still civil servants who are very afraid of making mistakes, of giving some kind of, let's say, advantages to the business sector. And there's many who still think that the only way of communicating with the business sector is through requests for information. And this is a reality in many European cities today. So I think we have a long way to go, but this is about creating trust. It's about creating these environments that are conducive towards having, honest, open dialogues. And of course, then it's also about political will. But I think we're all very aware of this. And then it's also about finding these good, let's say, models of how we can work together. Either it's about, strategizing on a kind of like high level in terms of what we want the city to look like. And then more practical, let's say, collaboration agreements on building specific infrastructure or even facilitating specific infrastructure together. So there's a range of issues there, but I think at least I see that there's still a way for us as cities to go on that topic.
When you say, maybe one question, you say request for information, you mean that's a formal way of addressing the community instead of a collaborative stakeholder dialogue that you have, indeed, I wanted to clarify that. Yeah, maybe something about the corridor activity and political, building political capacity at that level.
I think the political will is there. So, if you take Move 21 as a starting point and we see that, we can create these, let's say, extra synergies and extra effects by looking across urban nodes and how they're connected, I think the political will for that is there. Certainly in Move 21, in all of the 6 cities who are working in this project, and I see it also elsewhere in other cities. Then maybe where we haven't gotten so far is then translating that political will into, let's say, more specific tangible action points for civil servants to follow up. Because, and again, if you look at, you want to talk about working across urban nodes, this is, again, you very quickly run into, let's say, cross-border collaboration issues, which have traditionally been dealt by national agencies, national authorities. So, we all agree that we need to do more on this, and it's more about how do we actually make, let's say, actionable plans that we can follow up, because I think the political will is there. It's more about how we actually then translate that in a smart way into something that we can action on, on a more administrative level.
Okay, thank you. There's a question from Tom Antonissen. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Ivo. So I'm Tom Antonissen from the European Parking Association. So when you mention parking, I get some electric shocks. and I heard it a few times. So we represent both on-street parking from the public sector, work very closely with POLIS, and also off-street parking, which are more the private parking operators. So firstly, on your discussions on public-private dialogue, we have national parking associations in all the countries you are from. So if you want, please come to me and I'll give you the contacts. They'll be happy. Noordpark is, by the way, very active. So happy, I'm sure they will want to do that, and outside of any RFIs or RFQs and so on. But as a question related to the EU projects, can I ask you in your projects, how many of you have actually involved, in this case then the private parking operators? Because we do look very much at urban logistics, and we work a lot on what we now call mobility hubs. So the existing real estate in city centers used for parking can be repurposed somewhat. So the question, have you been working with that sector in your projects? And the follow-up question, do you want to work on future projects with us? And if so, you know, again, please come and find me. Question for the whole room as well, of course. Thanks, Ivo.
Thank you.
I can go.
Good.
Because that's easy. So we have the local parking company as a partner. In fact, in Move 21 in Sweden. And so we work with them, and so we actually have a mobility hub that is now opening on their premises. So we do work very closely with them, and but that's just an example. And I think you know it's, we try. I mean, we try to work with all the necessary stakeholders. Not always pans out the way we want to, but at least that's from our experience, and it's been a very positive relationship so far. So that was.
Sergio, I guess you as a parking operator, you can answer positively to the question as well. Yeah.
Well, I mean, he was asking exclusively, I guess, if I understood correctly, private parking operators. As far as I know, under LEAD project, actually our contribution to LEAD was not only coordinating the whole project, but also providing space for the pilot in Madrid specifically. But for instance, under a scale-up project in which we are also partners together with the City of Madrid, we have also provided space for deployment of, we call it our flagship mobility hub. Actually, it's very fancy. You can visit it whenever you go to Madrid. It's Canalejas 360. And it's a kind of cooperation between private and public, because actually the ownership of the space, let's say, the ground, is the city, the municipality. But the parking was given under a concession scheme to a private operator for, I guess, more than 30 years. So using or taking advantage of a new urban regeneration project in the whole area, the promoters of this new hotel and commercial mall and all these ask for the refurbishing of the parking and also the refurbishing of the surface area. So what the city said is, okay, we will give you permission, but then you need to sort of give us in return the management of the -1 floor to turn it into a mobility hub that will be managed by EMT as a public company. So this way, I guess it was quite a win-win situation. But in terms of upscaling or scaling up these micro-logistic hubs within private operators or private parking operators, they are aware about the initiative, but I guess the most challenging aspect here is that the business model doesn't seem to be fully profitable yet. So being a public operator is easier because we work for the sake of all, and we can assume some reduction in the income, whereas in the private sector that might be more challenging. So we are on the path. Yeah.
Further comments about parking from Antwerp or from Howard?
The coordinator would probably be better to answer this, because the project in Bremen, they appropriated parking spots to put in the micro hubs. But again, I think it's the business case, because these centrally located areas tend to be a bit more expensive also for parking. So you need enough volumes going through, but that's also why the 2 parking spots that are, or is it 3 parking spots for the 2 micro hubs in the city center are continuing after the project, but the one that was didn't quite achieve those volumes, wasn't able to sort of pay the rent after the project. But I do think it, sort of your question touches upon a very important issue. Sort of a lot of these greener solutions require some sort of infrastructure in the city center to operate effectively, whether that's a single container or something larger that's potentially a larger scale and more effective, but it's quite expensive. In Oslo, there's 3 logistics hubs in a very sort of prime location right now, but they're temporary and the whole area is slated for redevelopment in the next few years. So they're paying relatively expensive rents as far as I'm aware, but it's under what it would normally be. And so where they're going to go in a few years is, yeah, a question.
They're going to come to our consolidation center that we're building in Route 21.
Okay. And Michiel or Katja for Antwerp? Yep.
Yeah, so for Scale Up, we have parking rights, but are publicly owned, so not private. We have Canalejas, which you explained, Sergio. I think for the city of Antwerp, when we look at private parkings in the city center, one challenge we see is that we not always receive all data. For example, for when it comes to the number of free or empty spaces in the parking, which could be useful to, for example, if we give routing advice to people, know if they go towards one parking, that they can park there, that's not full. So this is a thing that we've been discussing. It's hard to get that data to use, for example, in our route planner we have.
Okay, thank you. Ian Fay, just before giving the microphone to Ian, so next year normally you will hear from a project called DISCO, where EPA is working on these business and financial models for freight hubs and parking, and to make that work better. So it's something that's on its way. Yeah.
Which is the sister project of Unchained,
Indeed.
another project in which we are involved also to work on that.
So
good. All synergies.
It's on the agenda, the question. Ian, please.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question to Tina in Oslo. There's a word that caught my eye, integrated policy. If you could elaborate a little bit on what's behind integrated policy. But the question I have regarding integrated policy is this a strong enabler? Is this something we just discovered as the missing link? Do we need to do more here? What's the leverage behind integrated policy, or is it just nice to have?
It's not nice to have. It's a need to have. You know, if you compare need to have versus nice to have. We see often that we have policies that are very sectored and very siloed. So we have, you know, specific policies when it comes to energy consumption, energy generation, and so on and so forth. We have specific policies when it comes to land use, both planning and management, and then something specific on transport. And we very rarely manage to see these across, and we know that it sometimes creates suboptimal results, you can put it like this, but it's often very difficult to do something about it also, and I know this coming from a city. I'm trying to coordinate 3 different departments now for a relatively small thing, and it's taking up most of my time. So I mean, it is quite difficult, but at the end of the day, I think we see that this, you know, in order to be able to address the challenges that we see in our cities in a straightforward manner, we need to have, let's say, better coordination between policies. And this is where the integrated policy comes in, and this is where, you know, we need to make sure that we have policy responses that also can cover, let's say, more than one sector at a time. So it's definitely a need, and we see it, but it takes time to do something about it, and it's also difficult.
So the leverage is high, and we're just at the beginning.
Yeah.
We have to do more.
Yeah. And of course, then it helps that you have also, you know, political will, because this is not necessarily, how should I put it, the most sexist topic necessarily. If you come in as a newly elected politician and somebody brings this to your table, you think, Maybe. So it's also about creating this awareness that you need to have these kind of, let's say, integrated policy responses in order to be able to run your city effectively. So it's also about creating awareness and understanding maybe on that level as well, if I may say so.
If we continue along this pathway of basically supporting projects, especially with this aspect of integrated policy, we'll be building up the database. I heard the word evidence-based to support the reason why politicians should continue with that, correct? Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
That's another project. That sounds like a research.
Okay, I don't see further. There's a question there on the third row. I have also great questions if you would stop asking questions, but we're also almost ending our Q&A.
It's more a thought that came up with that integrated policy. Martin Niemann, Mann and Hummel, we are running a project, Aerosoft, on retrofit solutions for cleaner urban mobility. And there we are looking for an environmental social life assessment. That's a holistic approach. And I think that could go along with that integrated policy. As you said, for Madrid, it's to the benefit of all the cities are acting, so this is taking more holistic approach. Can you comment how environmental, social life cycle assessment could help you with your decisions and with urban logistics?
It's a question about the vehicles, which we, in the project, are not really on the table, or
I mean, if we tackle the social aspect of the solutions that have been implemented and how to evaluate those impacts. Within LEAD project, we have taken into account some social KPIs, which I must admit many times are not the easiest one to measure and monitor. But for instance, the creation of jobs. Also, from the point of view of the generation of economic activity, let's put it that way, and then how some others which are purely environmental, but from the point of view of social well-being are also quite relevant, such as the noise impact of the vehicles in a very dense urban environment. But it is true that the social aspect is many times not the most easy to evaluate and to monitor. For instance, we have found that the use of these communities of practice have been very useful for us. It is true that whenever you count the different associations, no matter if there are neighborhood associations, business associations, user associations, the opinion you get might not reflect the reality of all of us, but they give you a good idea on what is the impact that potentially any specific measure can have. It's difficult. I mean, yeah, it's difficult to evaluate. That is the truth, I must admit. But we are aware that, of course, sustainability must comply with the three approaches, not only economic or environmental, but also social. And it wouldn't have any sense if we just push out of the picture any one of those, or any one of the three. Yeah.
Howard, you are the researcher on the table and in a Transport Economic Institute, so we hope you bring an answer.
Right. So one of the things we started looking more deeply at ULaaDS, but we saw that there was more we needed to do if we were going to implement it properly. I mentioned space use efficiency in my presentation, and we suggest that as sort of the seed of potentially an indicator of nuisance, you could call it, where you look at some of the other, try to sort of begin to quantify some of the other impacts of different types of vehicles and sizes, and develop an indicator which would help cities more quickly understand sort of what are these different impacts. So you could look at things like improved sight lines of using smaller vehicles, or a project we've done earlier looked at interactions with pedestrians, we called it. So if people are sort of surprised by a vehicle behind them or move out of the way, as an indicator that it's making an area less pleasant, and extending that to look at sort of, does it do people avoid entering an area in the first place because of the presence of logistics activities? Does this impact the sales in the store? Can you measure a truck blocking the store window? Does that reduce the number of people going in? These are all things I would like to investigate more, but we started just looking at sort of, for the size of the vehicle, how much weight is it able to deliver over a given period of time? And one of the things we saw in ULaaDS is those Rydal cargo bikes I mentioned. It was almost impossible for them to so little that they had less space use efficiency than a large truck. So if you can think about that sort of from a social aspect and try to understand more what that's giving an area, I think that's an interesting avenue of research.
Okay. Short comment to conclude on this question. Tina, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that in Move 21 we've done what we call space syntax from a sort of a social layer perspective. So seeing, okay, what happens with pedestrian flow, for example, if you put in logistics hubs here or there or somewhere else, what happens if you move a bus stop this way or that way. So we have some data on that, and also augmenting already what the sort of the analyses we can do with the digital twin. So we have that, but I think the challenge is that to my knowledge, I'm yet to meet a city, and it includes my own, where this is sort of incorporated into the daily decision making or where everything goes in a city. So it's not necessarily translated into the sort of transport management and planning that we, and land use planning that we do otherwise. So let's say we have still some way to go in terms of, you know, in a way, maybe monetizing is the wrong word, but monetizing that knowledge in the sense that we incorporate that into the daily practices that we have.
Mm. Okay, thank you. The clock is ticking, so I will conclude. I would like to, before giving the floor to Yannick with some closing words, just to highlight the fact that we are always interested in scaling up these solutions, and what's interesting is that all these projects ran in parallel with a very interesting policy trajectory, policy development at European level. The revision of the TEN-T directive, TEN-T regulation, it's been mentioned several times by the speakers, with an upscaling, to use the word, of the concept urban node from 88 designated urban nodes now to 431 urban nodes who are required to develop SUMPs with a freight dimension, who are developing, have to develop urban freight intermodal infrastructures. So the policy path to upscaling of all these solutions is immense, and it's a decade and a half of intense activity using the results of these projects. Yannick, floor is yours for the final words.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivo. Just a few practical words, basically. First of all, I would like to thank all of our speakers, which we had with us here today, and all of your presentations, so thank you very much. We'll be ending this session here. Please remember to stay actually within the room, because there will be another session following this one here now. So we'll have a plenary which will be starting at 18:20, so within 10 minutes. And this one is titled Software-Defined Vehicles, Accelerating Innovation and Digitalizing Automotive. So thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.